Hello, you're watching CNN Money Switzerland. I'm Ana Maria Montero. Welcome along. According to our guest, there is a considerable lack of funding for female-related tech products. In this episode, we're looking at what's driving the boom in Femtech and why there is still such a gender gap. The World Bank says women make up nearly half the world's population. When it comes to the economic burden for women's diseases, the UN estimates it in the tens of billions of dollars. But our guest tonight, Leah von Bitter, the co-founder and CEO of fertility device Ava, says only 4% of the R&D investment in health products and services account for women-specific needs. She explained to me earlier what that means.
We're seeing that there's still a clear disparity in where women's health is compared to how we're trying to progress overall healthcare. And part of that is definitely that we're just seeing the innovative companies, so really the startups, are lacking funding still on that are working on women's healthcare.
Could it be a question of language? Could it be that Femtech is the wrong term to use?
I don't think so. I think people have been trying to hide women's health under the term Femtech so that it sounds more techy than it is. But really, we're talking about women's health. That's what Femtech is mostly about.
So it's an advantage to call it
I think so. I think people like to invest in tech still, so yes.
Okay. So so when you talk about the funding, for example, for startups, let's look at that,
sure,
that sector. Where is the problem? What's happening?
Well, I mean, I think we still see, a lot of the companies that work in women's health have probably a higher likelihood of having female founders, and I think we're seeing that there's still a disparity in venture capital going to women in general. I think we're now at 1 or 2% of the venture capital. And then I think secondly, it's still considered kind of a niche market. Although I do have to say that I think the mindset has changed dramatically over the last 1 or 2 years. So we are seeing an acceleration of funding going into Femtech, mainly fueled by the fact that there's more and more successful companies in that space, and they're kind of guiding the light for everyone else.
And to that point, that's interesting you bring that up, because there is like a number of 1 billion, according to PitchBook, in funding has been raised just in the last handful of years. 3-4 years for Femtech.
Yeah, so the world is really changing. I mean, we started 5 years ago, and I think the world is changing because we're just seeing more and more companies pushing into the space and finding solutions in the space.
Now, you were successful in getting funding for Ava. So
we have been,
roughly, what do you think, 38 million?
42.
Right? 42. Oh, 42 million. Very nice. With your rounds of funding, what did you do differently? What did you think made that funding successful for you?
Well, I think generally we really came into the space based on solid scientific research. So we really look at ourselves as a healthcare company, a healthcare and data company that operates within women's health and is a very vision and mission-driven organization as well. But we have solid scientific results, and we really see ourselves as a healthcare company. And I think within Femtech, that's still an open question. There are certain companies in Femtech that are scientific, and then there's certain other companies that come to it more from a consumer angle. And we really clearly didn't want to do that. And we, from the beginning on, invested very strongly in the healthcare angle. And I think that was very helpful for us. And then I think we're seeing a huge boom at the moment in investment in fertility companies. Fertility is a space that is tremendously growing, especially in the US, because of the payer structure that has changed. And so I think the fact that we started with fertility has really had an impact.
That concern for Femtech-related investment comes ahead of Women's Day this weekend. Casimira Jeffert is standing by in our Lake of Geneva studios. Thank you for joining us. What is the situation then for women in other industries, Casimira?
Hi, Ana Maria. So if we look across all industries, I've been doing some digging into some figures. The number of women holding managerial positions is about 1 in 4. The number of women in boardroom positions across the world is about 16.9%. Now, that's up slightly on 2 years ago. And Switzerland comes in above that average, but still, when you look at the 100 top employers in Switzerland, only 10% of those seats are held by women. So there's still a long way to go there when it comes to female representation on boards.
So if we break it down to sectors, then specifically, where are women still underrepresented?
Definitely, if we look at the science sector, so the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, there are not enough women holding those top-level positions, and indeed across the workplace. In fact, a UNESCO report says that around 29% of R&D roles are held by women. One of the issues is that there's not enough comparable statistics really to be able to look at what's going on in this field, why women aren't pursuing careers in science. Other areas are kind of emerging sectors like cloud computing, AI. We're also not seeing enough women in those sectors.
So talk to me now about the pace of change. I mean, how is this moving along when it comes to addressing gender equality?
Well, if you look back 25 years ago when the Beijing Declaration was adopted by 189 UN member states to advance women's rights, a lot has happened since then, especially in the field of politics. For example, we've seen the number of women in parliamentary seats doubling in that time, which is great news, obviously. We're seeing more women entering presidential races, like in the US. We had multiple candidates just this year, although the last contender there, Elizabeth Warren, as we know, dropping out. In Finland, we have an all-female-led coalition that came into force at the end of last year. So a lot going on there, but the pace of change is still slow. The UN Women, the UN Agency for Gender Equality, just yesterday held a press conference saying the pace of change needs to be stepped up and more needs to be done.
Well, that's a little discouraging. But what you said before was some positive news, some positive bits. What is driving that change that you mentioned earlier?
I think we're seeing more collaboration between different sectors, between the public and the private sector. And we need to see more kind of multi-stakeholder collaboration to increase the pace of change there. We need to see more investment in education, especially at the early stage. We need to see more in terms of policies. Obviously, there's the controversial topic of quotas. The UN says that actually quotas have been very influential in helping getting more women into those positions of power in politics. And if you look at Latin America, for example, they've introduced the countries there have introduced quite a lot of quota-led policies, and which explains why that region has the highest representation of women in parliament at over 30%. So lots more work to be done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Casimir, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
All right, and you can get involved, of course, in all of today's news via our multiple social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. We always want to hear from you, so comments welcome. And, of course, on our website, cnnmoney.ch. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.